If nothing else, with the example of my wife, if you keep pushing off the thing that you're wanting to change, kicking the can down the road, that of itself is problematic.
Right.
But also, because we talk about some mental health stuff here. We talk about
Sure we do.
We even talk about some psychoanalytic stuff every once in a while.
Absolutely.
So the idea is that all behavior exists in a context. So
Right.
With my wife's smokeless tobacco habit,
Wrong. Keep going.
the goal would be not necessarily that she should stop doing that,
Okay.
but maybe she would stop whatever is going on or address whatever is going on that makes her need that.
Okay.
It's there's a different switch, you know.
Get to the cause of things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as opposed, because there used to be a thing we talk about in the literature a lot called symptom substitution. That if you removed if you just targeted the symptom and removed it, something else is going to show up.
Yeah. Is that still a thing now? Do we still talk about that in
research doesn't
graduate
narrate,
schools
because it was often used as a way to disparage behavior therapy and behavioral therapies.
Oh, that's right. The fight between psychoanalytic and behavior therapies.
Right.
Actually, a book. Wachtel wrote that book. That was a great book to read. But
I have met and hung out with Wachtel.
Yeah,
I have. Yeah, but he was a guy who thought that they could be merged.
Wrong, evidently.
well, but
well, maybe so. I mean, I not long this morning, as a matter of fact, I told a story about a therapy in a therapy situation with a couple who were very intellectual and gained a lot of insight and looked at things, but it was only the behavioral method that seemed to make a difference with them. So some kind of joining between those two things, maybe not a bad way to go.
Well, what may be helpful, it's interesting because people don't realize that the average number of sessions Freud saw someone was 4, and that we have at least several of his cases where at the time he used direct behavioral intervention. So the real world looks nothing like a book that someone wrote to prop up a theoretical model.
All right, let's we need to cut that out. That needs to be a clip right there.
So we all know that. We learned the hard way. In fact, I imagine anybody who comes from a strict theoretical model, the minute they hit the real world is like, okay, this is not the way. Regardless of what the model is.
I want to go back and say, you didn't teach me what we need.
There's some things missing there.
That's good.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
All right, everybody, welcome to Got Therapy. I'm Michael Baltimore, but look, we have a special guest, and this is Dr. Jeff Conklin.
Good morning.
Along with
a man who was responsible for this at some point.
Yes, that's how I explain the world.
Really,
84% of the population is average or below.
Okay, there you go. He's on camera saying that. So
but how does this explain the world? How does this heuristic sort of organize the world for you? What does it do?
When you see people out there and they do something that's completely boneheaded, and you're going, oh my God, just think they're average. That's where they plug in. That's 84% of the world. They're right there.
There's quite a few of them too. It turns out,
yes.
if we look at those numbers.
I think I may be at this end of the
some days
on the curve. So I don't know.
Some mornings, right?
I might be on that end. Yeah, it's
All right, so guys, this is going to be fun. This Saturday morning, downtown Columbus, and what else is going on besides Got Therapy?
Suddenly, I had a craving for a corn dog. You ever get that? Just sort of a sudden urge for a corn dog?
Never for a corn dog.
You want the truth? Yes. I'm sorry, I had to say.
And you don't eat meat. How can you eat a corn dog?
Morningstar makes a faux corn dog.
I didn't know that.
I do faux corn dog.
Wow.
This is there's no telling.
Because I've always had an interest in carnival workers, and two of the folks that I know who work in carnivals smell like corn dogs.
Oh, they always smell like corn dogs.
So,
it's like fast food workers, right?
Yeah, you can't. Where in fast food can you get a corn dog? What's a
I don't know. I don't think
know.
so. I know. There's a new place called the Cookout.
Is it Sonic or is it Crystal? Has those little?
Sonic.
Sonic is,
right?
Okay.
Yeah. And Cookout out by the mall.
Do they have corn dogs?
They've got everything
I didn't know that.
Shouldn't eat. They've got it all out there.
They have onion rings. That's what's important.
Yeah. Well, now that's a different story. Not connected to the corn dog, but
that's onion rings is sort of the kink food of fast food. It's not, it's, people don't like talking about it.
I don't know.
But they like them. They just don't know.
Nothing wrong with us.
It's 84% of people like them, okay?
In fact, I would think that probably fast food might hook a considerable number of the folks on that end.
Oh, I would believe that.
Yeah. I was wondering if you really had a problem with that statistic, because after all, it's a bell-shaped curve, and there you go. You look at the numbers, you add them up, Jeff, right?
Every time.
Am I wrong? But every time I see a bell-shaped curve, I find it oddly erotic. So am I the only one?
That's only your
Mama.
problem, no one else.
I don't know what that.
Okay, I could tell already. This is
going right
go
down
the tubes before we get this thing started. But so I don't know. But it's great to have you in here, Jeff. How have you been doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I saw you yesterday.
Appreciate
we had
the
a little
invitation.
lunch.
Yeah, we did.
Well, listen, you're invited anytime. I mean, I've invited hundreds and hundreds of people to come in.
Most people
to be with,
know better.
And no one has taken it. You're the second.
There we go.
So good luck to you in the next few minutes is what I'll say.
Right now there's a homeless guy out there in the rain saying, you know what, I think I'll stay in the rain. You know?
I could have been on the show. Could be warm and dry. No, thank you.
I think I'll just choose. Choose pneumonia. Yeah. It's not really.
Just sit here by the dumpster,
Above average and going. That's what he's doing. So I don't know what our topic is today. I thought I got a little bit of a text, but I wasn't sure where you wanted to go with this today. And by the way, hang on, Jeff. We're about to get started. So there you go.
All right.
Here's what I was thinking, because I was listening to one of these. Ever listen to one of them podcasts? Podcasts?
Yeah.
I've heard them.
Kind of what we're doing here. But go ahead.
Once or twice.
That's what. So I was listening to a podcast, and I went several of them, and they were talking about the purpose of music, like what it does to us, what it does for us, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm a tad obsessed with music. That's why I was asking earlier about what kind of music you like, and I think you'd said Boxcar Willie or
no, Slim Whitman.
Slim Whitman.
Not many people will admit
category.
to that.
I don't.
Okay.
Not sure.
That's okay.
Well, I apologize if I was setting you up for the next thing to
sure
come.
Were.
Yeah, evidently. So,
but that's okay. I actually like. I remember they used to sell a Ronco record of Boxcar Willie.
Did they?
Remember it would come on late night.
They were always late night, right?
He's the guy with a.
Put it in the roaster thing and it spins around, and that guy.
Boxcar Willie was known for harmonica, wasn't he? He would play the train harmonica, woo woo woo, the harmonica.
I don't know.
I think that's Boxcar Willie.
Sorry, I thought he was an authority.
That would make sense with a name like Boxcar Willie doing the train sounds.
Make train sounds with harmonica. That's all I remember.
But you're saying music has
I thought,
purpose, right? So let's talk about it.
We all in this room like music, right?
Yes.
This is
pretty much.
And it might, and so maybe we could just open up some questions about its purpose. Maybe even to think of how it might organize our lives in some form or fashion, because maybe it has. Like if you were to think about the songs of your youth. Mm-hmm. What is the soundtrack for key developmental moments in your life?
Oh yeah, wow. That's right.
Right, there are, and that may allow us sort of to think about it as its utility. Maybe even there's a couple of theoretical ways we can sort of think about music too that might be I thought could be helpful. But that's where I was at.
Well, it seems to me that it has a big impact on our lives. Probably more for some than others, but across the board it has some sort of impact. But if you're talking about developmental stages in our life, there was a certain group of sounds and music that was, sort of adjacent to those events in our lives, and it probably has some effect on how we recall those events. Mm-hmm. So when you think back to a certain time, there's a certain
soundtrack
collection of soundtrack with all the music. So you think that's true?
I
do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I don't know if you realize this, but one of the songs that I associate most with my wedding night, "The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round." Just whenever I hear that song,
wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Or the wheels come off the bus is what I was kind of thinking, but I'm not sure. But
train kept rolling all night long.
Yeah, that was an early. He got married young too. I'm thinking that's what that was.
I guess.
Well, here's my question.
Arranged marriage, right?
So, yeah, it was. There was
another problem.
There was some arrangements, all right.
Yeah.
There was a harness.
Okay. Just don't go into details, please.
Here we go.
Come on, Jeff. See, I'm sorry I invited you to this thing, but here we go. This is what we do.
So the first question would be like, so think about a song that you really liked. Like for many folks, right? You may have listened to music, but remember there was a time when when music sort of hit. Can you remember the time when like music became something you really sort of, really turned on to? And if you think of the songs that may have sort of occurred around that time, have you ever gone back and re-listened to them? Do they still have the same impact? Are they still important to you in the way that they may have been at that time?
Well, I'll jump in first, Jeff.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I think they do because it set up a marker at that particular time. And now on just about everywhere you go, they're playing the songs of the 60s. And it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in the grocery store. It's on everything. So there's almost a point that these songs we remember and we really liked, and there they are playing over and over again. Okay, we're tired of that now a little bit. But the idea is that, certain music from my background seems to be still played, used in commercials all over the place.
Well, and that's, I think, kind of sad. When a song you really like is in a commercial now for,
right,
Glad it can bags or something like that.
Yeah, it connects with people.
But I remember I used to be a big oldies fan, 50s, 60s rock and roll.
Right.
And then I owned a bar. And that's what we played, was 50s and 60s rock and roll. And now I have a hard time listening to it.
It's like you've done it. You've been there.
And I burned out on it because we played it all the time.
So just because it was over and over. Well, what would be a 50s song that would sort of like you would stand out, one that would really sort of hook you?
Oh, gosh. Some of the songs we used to listen to was like Tommy Edwards, It's All in the Game, things like that.
Okay.
That was, a good belly rubbing song you'd play and the dance floor would fill, things
belly
like that.
rubbing song.
Yeah, that's
close dancing.
There we go.
Oh, okay. That's it. Bellies rubbing together.
Yes, sir.
I get that.
Yeah.
So you're talking to a Freudian over here. So
I guess so. Where are we going with this?
We can turn down that road.
And when you have a dance floor in a bar and you want to get people out there, you'd play.
The slow tune that you're going to dance to, and people are on the floor, right?
And then I remember the Buddy Holly tunes, a lot of those. And
so really 50s.
Well, and the thing about Buddy Holly is I have an older sister, and that was her music. And so that's what we'd listen to. And she taught me to slow dance to Tommy Edwards. So, that's how I got influenced by that stuff. So
I'm not going to go Freudian on that. I'm not going
to. Somebody has to teach you how to slow dance. So if you date, you can do.
Well, here's the thing. See, I grew up in an age when slow dance, because you're talking about the music because now I'm going to the grocery store and I'm hearing. I grew up in the late 70s, 80s. And so I've gone into the grocery store, and there's a band called the Pixies, for instance, that launched right about when I was about 18, 19, maybe a little older, but it was 87. So I guess I might have been 19. And I heard a Pixies song in the grocery store. And I'm thinking,
man.
I was just in the other day, and there was Steve Winwood playing.
Really?
Yeah.
What were they playing?
I've forgotten the tune now,
Ark
but it was
Diver.
from one of his. Well, they do play that one.
They do a
lot.
Yes.
Ark the Diver. Yeah, that's from a later album, but there were some earlier ones too. So it's just amazing that how this is still in this culture and still kind of in the atmosphere everywhere you go.
Sure.
I'm not sure the impact of that.
Well, some folks, like when you talk about burnout on certain sounds, like I can think of I probably really began to thinking about music, and I guess I was about in 78. I was 12, so maybe 13. 79. I remember starting to listen to music, and there were albums that my sister had sort of left. And one of the first that I really remember listening to a great deal of was the Moody Blues in Search of the Lost Chord.
Sure.
And so, and there was, I think it was maybe Styx Paradise Theater, I think. One of those early Styx albums.
Yeah, that's
and so
70s for sure.
when I go back and listen to the Moody Blues can hold up, but the Styx, like I remember really being obsessed when I was a kid, but I go back and I'm a little cringy because you don't. I'm like, I do not. That's a little. That's a little much. So maybe maybe some of this loses its allure and luster. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think so. But there's probably those go-to songs that we all have somewhere on our list now on our device, in the car, wherever you play music that still holds up over time. But now it's more of not just one song, but it's a collection or it's different groups.
Sure.
And so I've got a playlist now. Playlists were not a thing back in the day.
Well, there were mixtapes.
Mixtapes. Oh, yes.
I'm talking prior to mixtapes. There was nothing.
Yeah.
Because at one point, I think my first music was I got a record player.
Okay.
And it didn't have that many records. So there were 45s.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
With
Oh,
the
yeah.
spindle in the middle. And then there's the album when you're lucky enough to get an album.
And you'd save up and buy a 45 and, Beatles Day Tripper.
Yeah, and here in Columbus we had Flipside Records.
Oh, yes.
That you could find the most obscure albums out there, but they still had 45. So days gone by. I apologize. So we're getting too far back.
Well, I remember walking with my friend Mark to the Big K, because he lived in this bigger town. He was 14 miles, so he lived in a town that actually had, stores. And so I remember he and I would walk to the Big K, and he would look at 45s. Like he was looking for, and there would be a section of 45s, and they'd all be in the little sleeves, and you'd find, what...
and there was an A side and a B side on all 45s.
Yes.
There was the one recording you wanted, but then you had to tolerate this other.
Fill the other side.
Through,
yes. Yeah. And now and then some band would put a good song on both sides.
Yeah, Beatles did that. As a matter of fact,
Beatles
sometimes,
did.
They had the number one hits of the B side.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a really good band would stretch on a B-side. You'd hear things you know. And it's funny because like I grew up in a time when punk had just hit, and so there was we were talking about my favorite band in the world a little while ago, Wire, and for a time, particularly in the underground and indie, to be popular was to be bad.
Right.
So it goes back to your thing. If people liked it, it sucked.
Yeah.
If you made a lot of money, then which kind of went against being able to eat. But popularity was not. It was that was selling out.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. You had to find the most obscure, revolt against the
man.
The man.
The man always. Yeah.
So that was it. And I grew up in an era where the '60s was distrusted. So it was like hippies were the worst thing in the world. So like the lead singer of Sex Pistols they invited him to join the band because he had a T-shirt, and it was a Pink Floyd T-shirt that he just put in lipstick "I hate" over the album. And so that's what got him the gig.
Right.
Because
outrageous. You go against the grain, right?
Which which was odd because of all Pink Floyd really weren't the kind of band that you could
say I hate them.
Yes, not really. And he probably didn't really hate them. He was just being a schmuck. But there were certain bands like for a while, if in Britain, the Beatles were often the target.
Oh, sure.
These bands that were sort of,
progressed out of the pop into this, they're doing their own thing, they're doing something different, probably along that same line with the others you talked about.
They sort of helped usher in, Pink Floyd, bands like that. Psychedelia became something that, but in the 80s, particularly, like you mentioned records, but I came around the time when CDs became a thing, so records were out.
Right.
And I owned some records and cassettes for a while, and then CDs.
Yeah.
But
no 8 tracks. Anybody?
Jeez,
anyone?
Mine are gone now.
Right.
I had my 8 tracks.
I apologize for being old, but
I remember an 8-track of an ABBA album called Voulez-Vous, I think, we had an 8-track, and there was a built-in 8-track player on that. We had one of those giant all-in-one wood, had a record player in it, an 8-track player, and then I remember that
the huge console.
It was
you
a
had
console. Yes,
play. Right. I remember those. So those were good days. But obscurity was key. College radio was big. Like how you learned about things, where you turn on the college radio and it was 90.1, I think was at UT, and you could listen. You would sort of see it. You'd hear like band, and their motto was, if you've heard it before, we're not doing our job. And so it literally was just a
I want to hear that song again. No, we don't. You can't. We don't play
short playlist.
What?
It's not,
all new.
And it would be like the most, like I remember there's a label out of New Zealand called Flying Nun. And for a while there, I don't know if you heard a lot of Lou Reed or Velvet Underground, but they said they had that sort of a jangly, lo-fi sort of sound to them, and there were all these bands coming off the Flying Nun label, and so you were, you'd try to find some, and you couldn't, you'd have to buy them on import. Like I remember going to a store in Knoxville, and you'd go to the import section because you wouldn't go to anywhere. Why would you go anywhere else? But you want to go to the import.
Okay.
And even at the time, like I've mentioned the band Wire, I bought one of their albums for $25. And this was like 1988.
That's a lot. That's a lot of money right there back in the day.
So it was a little like, my whole paycheck from Long John Silver's just went into buying this.
Always wait for the reference, Jeff. Let me just say that. It never happened, but still, it's a good reference.
It's a great one.
Right,
yeah.
There we go.
And so, I'm smelling like fried fish. I'm walking into the store, and I walk out with this thing. Another band called Bauhaus. They were like this. They were an early goth band, and I remember buying an import, their first album. Again, it was like $25, $30. Like you'd buy it, and then you'd go home and sort of you'd sort of like pulling the sword from the stone. You'd found this.
This is it.
And then you go home. You go back to your small southern town where everybody is even your mom does smokeless tobacco, and they're chasing a pig in the backyard.
Right.
Just another day.
Kill some chickens for dinner. My goodness.
But I'm different because I got this Bauhaus album. So in some ways, it sort of allowed you to sort of generate an identity and to create a sense of self. And it's interesting we talk about this because you guys probably have a slightly different cultural reference to music in a way, right? Or am I wrong? Because you mentioned the 60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that was... See, in my early days, of course, I was playing in bands because everybody played in the band. Everybody on the block, everybody on the next block, they all had a band.
Sure,
we put it together and started playing
Unless you had a banjo where I'm from, you didn't play in a band.
That's right. No banjos.
Scary.
Yeah. Remember the guy moved in with the electric guitar and the Fender amp, and that changed everything for us along the way. We were on bikes playing baseball until he showed up with this electric guitar, right? It changed everything. I also remember that there were, we moved to the albums, and the albums kind of thing was... is there one good song, or
often that was
all the rest of them are bad?
Yeah.
All those kind of things that is coming to mind now. But back in those times, we played the whole album side.
Sure.
So you got all of those songs in there. That's the way the turntables were set up. You didn't just play this one song. No. Like now, when you have a playlist, you play your song, those kind of things. But anyway, I just have to mention that. But yeah, so it was a different time, played in a band, played the music that was on the radio, and then progressed from there. Mm-hmm. So you had to keep up, because if you were playing in clubs or you played for money, you played where you go where the money was. So
you cranked up some Boxcar Willie. That's
we did not. We did not play Boxcar Willie, but
hang on, Sloopy.
Everything.
That's what every band did.
As a matter of fact,
so
how
did
we know?
We were a garage band that did that too. Yeah.
Everybody.
So you produced it. So that culture was, informed us, and we were kind of connected to what was playing and what was popular in a way.
Okay.
So that wasn't always the best music, but it's what people wanted to hear. So that's and also what we could play. By the way, that's another.
So think about it. Your trajectory seems to be being in bands. It was a communal activity. It was sort of within a larger cultural context. Post 60s, when disco hit, for instance, suddenly that communal element and the hedonistic element was cranked up, and then I think that. There were, particularly in Great Britain, where there was the economic crash and there were all these folks out of work, and the music that sort of spawned punk was sort of, in your face, anti-collective in all sorts of ways, and this probably isn't for everybody because I'm an obsessive neurotic, but
all right.
There's a book called Our Band Could Save Your Life. And so there was this notion that you could find something very important in music and in the band and in the culture and the genre it was part of. So for instance, when you bought an album, you didn't think of singles because it was like a novel. You listened to it, every bit of it, and you knew who did the cover art, who produced it, who you knew who influenced this band, so that you could sort of draw a tree and then begin to move backwards to be able to find things. And so it was like this. It was like, I remember the first time I'd ever heard Wire was I was at UT, and there was a guy who played in a band called C7 States, and he was a drummer. And he was
okay.
And if you're from Tennessee, or
right.
you know,
I think I know that reference.
The reference, the side,
side of the barns out there.
Yes.
So they're called C, and they were actually pretty good. And this is when REM really hit big. So there was this sudden bubbling in the underground, and so he had this great record collection, and so he loaned me 3 records. He loaned me Peter Murphy, who was the lead singer of Bauhaus solo album. He loaned me the Soft Boys, which was an underground, it was called Paisley Underground. It was sort of the 60s filtered through Syd Barrett area, Pink Floyd from Great Britain. Robin Hitchcock went on to sort of keep doing things, but the Soft Boys existed. They were named for, I think, a William Burroughs reference, and then a Wire album. Mm-hmm. And so I remember taking them home, and you before you put them on, you look at the album cover, you turn it over.
It's the album cover,
who did this, where that you scrutinize the members of the band. And I think you and I talked about this before, that like I remember as a kid, when we first, we used to have like 2.5 channels. First off, we're up in the mountains, and so you didn't get much. And, one of those channels was just some guy, blowing into a jug. That was all you got. And
don't remember that channel, but yeah.
Didn't get that where I was.
Yes, Boxcar Willie would have been
the top of the
major improvement.
That would have been like, but if Boxcar Willie only played the jug. But I remember turning it was called Night Flight, and this was before MTV. So Night Flight came on, it played videos, and videos had already started to exist and whatnot. And
okay.
I remember back to back they would play different things, and they played a Van Halen video. I think it was a live of them playing the Kinks cover, "You Really Got Me" or whatever, and then they played the Talking Heads song. Course, the same as it ever was. Mm-hmm. I'll think of the name of the song, but they played it, and I remember thinking to myself, "Good God, I am not David Lee Roth. I'm David Byrne."
Right.
Yeah. I am not. Okay. I'm not going to be that, and I don't really kind of wouldn't want to be that, but. Oh no! What do I do with this?
Right.
And that it became a way of self-definition. It set the parameters of and I think this happens for all of us to a degree, right? Because you identified with a rock musician or maybe a sports somebody or whatever, but it began that process of identification. You begin to sort of, and maybe I'm wrong, but certainly in the 80s and underground culture and whatnot. Music was this notion of this is how you could be true to yourself. This is how you could be part of a political movement or an artistic movement, and you could define yourself accordingly. And the Talking Heads were like that. Their early albums were filled with this neurotic energy and this sense, like if Van Halen were about the power of sexuality and this, exaggerating your sexual prowess and whatnot. The Talking Heads were about this sex stuff is scary. I mean, it was a whole different sort of like that. Why is my body doing this? And why are people expecting me to, it was a completely different sort of, and it couldn't possibly be popular. And Talking Heads at some point sort of began to have hits, but their first three or four albums were woefully obscure.
Right.
They were not, they were.
Well, I think too, as you were talking, I was thinking that it's a cultural thing because you sort of found the other people in your group that liked the same group or same albums and all of that.
Your tribe.
So it became
your
tribe. Yeah.
You can define your tribe. If somebody, like if you, I would even ask, what kind of music do you like? And that would allow me to determine if these are people I could trust.
Could I hang with them?
It's almost like a personality profile. Let me give you a list. That's
what do you listen to?
No, we don't like you because you're not with the Zeppelin crew. So that kind of thing.
And I was thinking about when Zeppelin first came out. I mean, not everybody was into Zeppelin.
No, it took a warming up to Zeppelin.
Yes, it
did it. Yes,
and
really did.
that first album was great stuff. I mean, they went so far, but I think you made a great point, Dan, when those were the guys you hung with, the same people that liked the same, and like when Bowie came out, and we'd all hang around and
right. And I found in the group too that somebody would introduce a new group. And I would go, I just. But then I had to if I'm going to fit in,
I better like this.
I've got to figure this thing out.
We're going to listen to this stuff. Yeah.
Right. And it turned out they were probably right. And I was just too forward.
You just had to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when somebody introduced the washboard into that Jug Guy's band. It was a while.
They weren't ready.
This is
point taken right there.
It was.
Yeah, so you've got to kind of fit into the group, and maybe your taste is going to change over a period of time with some things that are introduced. But that's what music was all about: is a new thing coming up. With the new thing, right?
But and think about how, in some ways, it sort of shepherds and ushers in the possibility of integrating parts of yourself. Not only is it social, but there's the sexual. There's all these sorts of things that you sort of, like you mentioned, Led Zeppelin. They in some ways helped along. Like Zappa sort of gave birth to heavy metal. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were sort of taking the blues and exaggerating them in ways that what was it? I think it was Pete Townsend or Keith Moon gave them their name because he said he heard them play live or heard them on a show and said, "Man, this is going to sink like a lead balloon." And
okay, there we go for predictions, right?
But,
not always the case.
He may have been joking, but they took that as a sign that
I think too that there's emotion that are connected with music, and it's sort of a feeling that you have connected to. Well, not only the music itself, but the event that you're at or the situation.
You see them in concert as opposed to at home.
Right.
With headphones on at 2 a.m. As a teenager, that was sort of those headphone moments. You would sort of. I remember hearing. There's a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain, and their music sounds.
Jeff, did you just say yes? You have that collection?
No, I don't have that collection, but I remember them. I remember them. Yes.
All right.
And it sounds a little like if you cross the Beach Boys with a chainsaw.
No. Okay.
So
that happens.
So they're sort of like there are these sort of Beach Boy-esque, Beatle-esque melodies buried under just layers of feedback. It's like It's like it's and so there's a song they have called "You'll Never Understand Me." And I remember as a teenager listening to that. You're right.
Sounds
no one's
true.
ever going to understand
me.
That's right.
And
that was the point, man.
It was like, and I saw them. I've seen them in concert a couple of times. And first time I saw them at in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1990.
Okay.
And I guess I was.
There's a memory right there for you. All right.
I guess I was 19 when I saw them, maybe 20. And so they come into the Knoxville Theater, and the opening band was Nine Inch Nails. And so it was already a little raucous because the lead singer, the guitarist by the hair and started dragging him around the stage. Oh, we are not in. When Jesus. Well, first off, before they came on,
you were blinded. You couldn't see, right?
Well, that was about to happen. They played a video of a song that I'd never heard from them, and they played. I was like, why are they playing a video before they come on? And then the song goes off, smoke rolls in, and suddenly the lights start going in your eyes, so you can't see. You're being disoriented, and the band is just a wall of feedback. You can't tell when the next song begins or ends, and they don't speak. The lead singer sort of sort of just draped over the and he's and it's just whatever, and they only played for like 30 minutes,
right?
And at one point I sort of just turn around and see what everybody's doing, and everybody's got their mouths open. They're going, my God, what is this? And some people are scared.
Happening.
And then suddenly it stops, and somehow the smoke is gone, and they disappeared, and we all just sort of filed numbly out of the theater.
That was it.
What was
Concert
that?
over.
And then I remember, my girlfriend at the time, and she was like, "Oh, God, it was horrible. What was that?" And I thought to myself, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen. That was literally, it was like, wow, that was perfect.
That's, yes, okay.
And you knew she wasn't for you.
And she wasn't.
Yeah, that didn't last long, did it?
Because my wife actually has seen them twice with me, and she's a Jesus and Mary Chain fan. So that is a there is a point there.
That's a compatibility factor.
Though I will say
they
seem to have learned how to play instruments in the time
Yes.
Or maybe because they're even though the feedback is still there is
they move the guitars away from the speakers.
There was. And when I say feedback, I mean ear piercing, not like this shrill, like a dentist drill.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like if somebody amplified a dentist drill.
Would you repeat that, because my hearing is gone now because of all of that. So
it was holy.
Okay, that was a moment that changed things for you.
It
evidently. All right.
Yeah.
And you identified with that sort of genre of music.
Well, see, but that I think maybe because you guys play an instrument, I might look for something. And one way to define music is organized sound that generates the seeking of meaning. So I say that because it is very broad. I spend lots of time listening to drones and ambient. And this morning I was listening to a band called Autechre. And it's one of their songs they have one song that's 42 minutes, but 27 minutes of what sounds a little like somebody might have dropped their synthesizers in a bathtub. It's really not. There's no melody per se.
Right, of course.
There are repetitive things going on within it, and so I often seek out that, if it is too melodic or too